cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
So thank you very much for the great introduction. I'm super excited to be here. I am super excited to be at Rolltech, and I kind of want to take you on a little bit of my personal journey from where I started and how I ended up and came both sort of to Las Vegas and ultimately to Rolltech. So first, I kind of want to finish up the introduction a little bit. So a couple things about me. Number one, I have been called, and I think in a good way, the godfather of Vegas tech. My license plate is actually Vegas Tech, VGS-TECH, so if I cut you off on the highway, I apologize in advance. I realized that actually the first time I got the license plate, I didn't know it, didn't think about this, but I got my license plate and accidentally cut off 2 people that same day, and I was like, God damn, they know exactly who I am, this is terrible. And I realized it was like super anonymous before I had that. Now everyone kind of recognizes the plate. It's actually the Vegas it's the Vegas Tech Twitter picture. It's been in Fortune and Forbes and all kinds of crazy places. So it's kind of cool. You can actually go see it at Work in Progress. And also, I have mentored over 100 entrepreneurs in the Vegas tech community, which is an offer that I make actually out to anyone who's out there now. I will take an hour of my day, listen to your pitch, give you feedback on it, and kind of tell you what I think of the idea. Remember that for later, because that's an offer I made actually out to Rich Belsky, who's here in the audience, the CEO and founder of Rolltech, and I kind of want to talk about that a little bit later. The other thing is I am also a co-founder of VegasStartups.com, which is a blog that I started in 2011, right as this scene was forming, early 2011, April, May timeframe. I wanted to know how many startups there were in Las Vegas. And at the time, I could name literally fewer than 5 startups. And so, wow, that's not very big of a community, so what's going on? And then I kept talking to people, and they said, hey, have you heard of this startup or that startup? And I said, no, I hadn't, so I wrote those all down. And the blog, actually, it's a little embarrassing what the first posts on the blog are, but if you go back in history and look, literally the first few posts on the blog were lists of startups in Las Vegas. Like, we took the name VegasStartups.com literally and just posted who was in town. And the list started at 5, and then we posted, I think, 15, and then another group of 15 or something like that. And it was crazy how quickly that list grew. I actually stopped posting. I got a little list up over 200 companies, and I stopped posting at that point because we had kind of proven that there was a community. I'm now CTO of Rolltech, but to kind of rewind back to how I got to Las Vegas. So my wife and I came here on our honeymoon, and this was actually .com 1.0 days, so mid-90s we come here. We just fall in love with Las Vegas. We think it's the greatest place. We do all the fun stuff on the Strip, but our very next trip to Las Vegas, we rented a car, and we just started driving around all the different neighborhoods in Vegas. So we were up in Summerlin, down in Green Valley, all these different areas, North Las Vegas, everywhere, and just kind of realized what anyone who lives here knows, and I think our visitors are coming to learn, is we're just a regular city, right? You get outside that little area of the Strip, and there's grocery stores, right? All the things that you need to sustain a normal life are there. Churches, synagogues, temples, everything. And we said, wow, this is a great place, and I really want to move here. And unfortunately, the startup community here at that time was really, really small. There were actually a few companies. Some became fairly big successes and acquisitions. There are actually 2 companies started in Las Vegas that were later acquired by IBM, the most famous one being SR&D, Systems Research and Development, I think it is, which is Jeff Jonas's company. Jeff Jonas is now an IBM fellow. There's only 200 or so IBM fellows. So we can produce some good tech talent here in Las Vegas. So couldn't move here, tried, all these companies were formed, and had actually earlier today was talking to someone who has been in Las Vegas for almost 20 years in the tech scene. It's Mike Yoder. And Mike and Frank Yoder came here in 1995 and really kind of forged a trail in a lot of ways of they were here, they believed in Las Vegas, but admittedly, even Mike said there was no community in kind of the 90s and 2000s. There was just little islands of different people not really working together. And so only a few years ago did that really change, and people started coming together, and the Jelly started, and Startup Weekend, and different meetup groups spawned and really gained some strength. And that was around the time that I got involved in the startup scene, started talking to entrepreneurs, and really also joined Zappos at around that same time. So we have this burgeoning scene. I'm at Zappos, but I really love startups. So kind of how can I mix these pieces together? So what I decided to do was, again, make this offer to talk to any entrepreneur and kind of hear their pitch and give them whatever advice I could on pitching or fundraising or what have you. And did that for, again, I still offer that, but I did that for over 100 entrepreneurs. And at a certain point, I came and sat down with Rich. And Rich actually has given me hands down the best pitch that I've heard. And I'll try and recreate it for you, and you can tell me if this is accurate. But we were over at the Cracked Egg on Green Valley Parkway near 215, near the old Zappos campus, correct? Yes? And I sat down, and Rich said to me, hey, I'm a league bowler. I've been a league bowler for a long time. There hasn't been a technological advance in bowling since auto scoring, which is about 25 years ago. You've got this great wealth of data. People bowl, their scores show up, and as soon as you leave the bowling alley, all this data goes away. And this stuff is captured. Why is there not access to it? Why can't I take this on my phone? Why can't I look at an app? Why can't I review my history and review that data to get better and learn and sort of do coaching myself or have someone else help me? And then was the kicker. He said, and by the way, I've talked to one of the major equipment providers, and they've agreed to let us have access to the data. Because without that, you can't do this. So the data is there, but it's in the center, and you have to tap in and get it. And at that point, he had hit all the hallmarks of a great pitch, right? So someone passionate about an area, someone knowledgeable about an area, identifies an opportunity, finds the business partner that he needs to make this work, and has already engaged that partner before kind of spreading this idea around a whole bunch. And totally fell in love with the concept, the idea, the way that Richard was approaching the problem, and became an advisor to Rolltech actually a few years back. So that was kind of my role. Stayed in touch with Rich. We would meet. We would talk over different issues, how things were progressing. And then came a point, I was at Zappos. I had been there for almost 3 years and was thinking about 3 years is kind of when a lot of people look for new opportunities and think about some other things. And I started to think about other things, and kind of the first thing that came to mind is, wow, I wonder where Rich is at today and what's the status. So I talked to him, and he gave me an update on where everything was and getting ready to really need to scale up the technology and do some other things. And I thought, this is kind of the perfect time to make that leap. So I left, and one of the things I was asked to talk about tonight was kind of advice that I had on sort of what I brought from the startup world into Zappos and what I brought from the startup world into Zappos and what I'm bringing from Zappos into the startup world. So what I am bringing into Rolltech from Zappos, we'll actually start there, is there's some interesting things that we did at Zappos that I think were really, really cool and fun and interesting. So we got involved with Eric Reese from the Lean Startup. He came out and talked to us, and we changed our teams into what we called product teams and started doing experiments on our website. And one of the experiments on the website was when you search for an item, we want to show you the most results possible to give you the best chance of finding what you want. And what we did was, if you go search, say for example, give you an example, Nike Free Run 2.0s, they come in a bunch of different colors, black, red, green, green with blue, whatever. And we thought that if we took those results, which currently on the site, and actually still today for a reason I'll tell you about in a sec, show up as 10 individual results. And so what we did was we said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we consolidated that down to one result and just put little color squares underneath to show the user that the customer that this comes in other colors. We did that, and in the room, it was unanimous. We were not debating if this would work or whether this would work. We were arguing with each other over how well it was going to go. We were like, this is going to be so great, and how great is it going to be? Not a dissenting voice in the room. And I talked to our COO at the time, and we were starting these experiments, and some experiments cost you money, right? They don't pan out. And he said to me, you have a $2 million budget to do experiments. Like, okay, great. $2 million for the year, we can use that to learn, and it'll make us better. We roll this out, and in the first week, used $300,000 of that $2 million budget. So we cost ourselves $300,000 in sales by running this on half of the traffic to the Zappos website, right? So fast forward, I come to Rolltech. What's one of the first things I tell Rich? We're talking about changes to the site. Geez, Rich, I think those are going to be better, but I don't want to promise that they're better. So I think Rich has probably heard this 20 times in the 3 weeks since I started. Hey, sounds like a great idea. We really should test this. And that was kind of my big lesson that I learned at Zappos and that I bring to Rolltech is the idea that you think you know your customer, but really until you put it in front of them, all you're doing is guessing. And I know that's been said before. I'm sure many of you have heard that. But I hope by kind of putting a specific example with it that was, fairly costly, it can kind of drive it home for you a little bit more. On the flip side, what I learned from startups that I brought into Zappos was the kind of the decisiveness that you need to have at a startup. So startups are not about waiting for things to happen and, oh, I hope something comes along. It's about acting, and oftentimes acting with incomplete information. And I'm super comfortable doing that. And I think I was able to bring that into the culture at Zappos a little bit in terms of our ability to try and move faster. I was also able to translate a lot of the startup ideas, particularly from the lean startup. I led an effort to, as I mentioned, to kind of revamp some of the teams there. And I think by having been at startups, I was able to see how that worked in a smaller environment and translate it into a larger environment. And I think that worked relatively successfully for us. I just kind of want to talk about the differences, though, between startup life and Zappos. So Zappos, awesome place, love it. I actually sent my farewell email to Zappos out to the team, and I called it Farewell to Zappos Part 1. And it was kind of like in the back of my head, there's always this thought that, I'm certainly would be willing to go back and happy to go back. I just think at this chapter in my life, Rolltech is the right place for me to be. But I think what Zappos has done for downtown and has contributed to the community here is amazing, and I will always, respect that. And to the point where, I feel like maybe there's a time when I go back. But startup life is 24/7, and the only challenge that I have is, as the great philosopher Walter Sobchak said in The Big Lebowski, I don't roll on Shabbos. Thank you.
We have time for a couple questions. So does anyone have questions for Rick? I'm going to start with a question.
Okay.
Do you bowl?
I do. I bowl. I actually founded a bowling team in my high school. I was one of the first people to bowl in my high school.
Do we have other bowlers in the room?
I'm going bowling tonight.
Yeah.
Right afterwards.
Use Rolltech.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions on the right there?
Right over here.
Yes. Do you think Zappos was the catalyst for the startup community growing? Because as you mentioned before, in the late 90s, there wasn't much of a startup community. I was born and raised in Vegas. I spent 5 years in LA because there was a lack of community here. But I'm gladly back now. But yeah, what do you think was the catalyst? Was it Zappos?
I actually, so I think Zappos contributed, but the one thing that I think is a little bit of, a little bit off is I don't think other folks who contributed get enough credit. So Zappos cast this fairly big shadow, and Tony, I saw him in the room, obviously gets a lot of press. But really, there are folks like, actually she spoke at the Downtown Lowdown yesterday, so Shavana Tiara, right, I have to give a shout out to her. Not a Zappos person, amazing doer, absolutely contributed to that. And I think it gave some momentum and some critical mass to it, but I don't think it was the only thing that helped.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I've got one over here.
You talked about testing. Can you guys hear me? Testing and your misfire on the merchandising dollars. What would you have done to test in that example? If you could do it over again.
So actually what we did was exactly what you have to do. You have to put it out there. And even though it was sort of costly in some sense, it was within the budget that had been established for tests. The only thing that, and actually, you know what, I actually have to say, there's nothing we would have done differently, because what we learned that was interesting that we had done some tests before that was we had put stuff out for a day or two and tried to read the results and found that you'd put it out and people on Tuesday, for whatever reason, behave differently than people on Wednesday. And we determined over a few tests that we actually had to leave it out not just for a week, but for 2 weeks. In this particular case, after a week, we felt fairly confident it wasn't working, so we did end up pulling it back. $300,000 was a pretty good indicator. But I would say there's really not much you can do except get it out there. Obviously, there are other ways to get things out there. We could have run it on a smaller amount of traffic. There's a whole variety of things. But ultimately, you have to get a statistically significant sample. And so I guess technically I wouldn't have done anything differently, but it still stings a little bit.
All right. Any more questions on this side? Beanbags, how we doing? You got a question? No? Just thumbs up. Okay.
Those are comfortable
Okay.
people, just
All right.
signifying
Yeah,
their
they're
comfort.
very comfortable. All right. There's this a hand? Okay, yeah, one more question.
What secret projects does Zappos have that we aren't supposed to know about?
As I am under an NDA with Zappos, I cannot reveal what secret projects there are. There are no secret projects.
All right.
Everyone give Rick a big round of
Let's hear for
applause.
Rick.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.